Welcome to the stage, Payal Arora, the Professor of Inclusive AI Culture at Utrecht University, who we're so lucky to have you here, not just because of what you're going to say, but also because, frankly, the journey was a bit of a nightmare. Thank you so much for being here. Anybody who's come from the Netherlands will know it hasn't been easy.
Hi. All right, so this is a perfect launching pad because I'm going to make a proposition here. What if we were to shift gears from thinking about training AI to teaching AI? Then how would we see the world and engage with the world differently, right? Through AI and with AI. So I make this argument of co-constructive work, which seems rather banal, right, in my new book, From Pessimism to Promise. But what's interesting is it's going against a tidal wave of a pessimism bias, particularly in the West, against all things digital, including AI, as Gerd has brought up, right? If you look at the media headlines, it's like AI is destroying our democracy, our social lives, our mental health, and even an existential threat, right? And if you look at the new books in the last few years, it's like AI is oppressive, it's racist, it's sexist. It's literally these values are baked into design, which makes you feel deeply impotent and helpless towards the future. No wonder they don't see the future, the ones in the West primarily. Because what's fascinating, and this is a footnote which we're not going to go into right now, but is that majority of the world doesn't think like those in the West. They are supremely optimistic, like as if they're on cocaine about AI and all things digital. And why is that so, right? Because they see it as, the only way to get past chronic issues, because AI is a friend, it's an extension, it's a tool to use to overcome chronic issues, right? So my point is a different kind of proposition, is that if we put learning and teaching at the center in the making of AI, then we can think differently in a way in making AI a little more just, fairer, and more equitable, to make these technologies work for us and not against us, right? So that way we don't need to brace for the future, we can embrace the future. So I guess the clicker again. All right. Maybe another one here. All right, that's another clicker. Okay, so just to give you a framing, right? The training AI versus teaching AI, what does that mean? Now, training AI, this is the computational mindset, it's repetitive, it's about optimization, which makes sense. But when you see it from that lens, then you are thinking about rote learning. But if you're thinking about it in dialogic and social process, you're thinking it as an iterative process. It's you and the AI learning from each other, right? We are getting to know how people think so we can change it if it's becoming more racist, if it's not inclusive. There's a sort of a mirror effect. Reproductive approach, the whole idea is we need to train by repeating cycles again and again and again, right? So that's very much the emphasis versus a reflexive approach. Because every time you're training AI, you're looking at certain results. You're paying attention to, is this what we want to be? And so we can think in those ways and shift the algorithm, right? Data as raw material, in which case we see it as something out there. It's like really abstract. It's like so when you go, like Sam Altman, through WorldCoin, he had this sort of project where he took an orb and went through something like 30 countries from the Philippines, Indonesia, capturing data. Because it was raw data to be mined, right? Very colonialistic, and then built his AI tools, versus it being a very essence of the way we communicate with each other, an extension of our dreams, our futures, and that shifts the paradigm about the way in which we approach data, right? And it's universalistic design, so it's, let's come up with a standard so as to dictate how we produce data versus data is encoded with values, cultures, context. So when we are, engaging with that knowledge, we are recognizing which cultures are represented and which are not, right? And last is, when you're thinking from a computational mindset, you're thinking about standardization. It has to, be reproducible versus that of diversification. Does it include everybody, right? So this is what happens when computer scientists try to do diversity in algorithms, right? So the Gemini AI tried to respond to the founding fathers, and in the name of inclusivity, threw in Native Americans, and I'm sure many of you have seen that, in the name of diversity. So this is an issue. When you eliminate the social scientists and humanities, voices into this conversation. So I'm going to give you two different projects that I'm engaged with right now, because it's not just a theorizing. We are really doing this as we speak, right? I'm engaged in two projects. One is called Finder, which is a Horizon European grant, where we are working, we meaning social scientists, humanities scholars. I'm an digital anthropologist, which is basically a fancy way of saying I study how people make sense of digital technologies in their everyday life, right? We're working with tech companies, recruitment agencies, so it's a real stakeholder approach. And the goal is to reduce discrimination in AI-enabled recruitment software. And we're trying to retrain AI by building data sets, CVs from data donation campaigns, and tweaking it in the way in which we want a fairer future. Because as you must have read about Amazon and many other sort of incidents where you ask AI to produce the best candidates for these CEO positions, and by default be a white male in, say the US, of a middle-class background, because that has been the standard. So if that is a standard, that will remain the standard. So garbage in, garbage out, because we need to change the paradigm. Otherwise, we're going to get the same old biases of the past into the future, even though as a society, we have moved forward. So we can't be held back by our data, can we, right? So that's what we're doing. And the second project is that we've been hired by a major multinational design company to debias a generative AI visual software. Because when you do Google images of, say, women at work, they all seem to be in the office, with straight hair and smiling and typing away, right? So you Google things and, it doesn't seem to reflect majority of the world. And so what does that look like? How do we do that? And here's some models we're developing. So with the Finder project, right, this is a really fun thing, is that through the data donation campaign, we got all these CVs, and the computer programmers took a shot at it. They're like, we've got a solution to debias. We remove the names, the gender, the age, and any religious and sexual notifications. And there you go. We have a completely debiased CV. Now we can use it to populate it. And we're like, all right, give us a shot. Let the humanities come in. We looked at it and said, wow, this is super biased, because there are a lot of proxies of discrimination. So the way in which you can train a model through proxies of learning framework is by, say, for example, these three. We have identity and agency, networks of visibility, cultural capital. Right? So let me give you an example on identities and agency. Is Polish a descriptive or a discriminatory variable? Well, it's descriptive if you live in Poland, right? But it could be discriminatory if you're looking at a sector, like a construction sector, in a context like the UK. So when you are programming, it's about context. Knowledge is never acontextual, right? So we are accounting for the identity in context. Or, for example, languages can be a proxy of whether you value somebody. Is it French, or is it a Hindi or Telugu? And you wonder, oh, that's not the kind of language I want, because it signals an international person that you may not want in your group. Or it could be gaps in CVs, which can reflect gender, right? Or identity-based recognition, where I want to positively discriminate. I'm celebrating that I won an award of Women in AI. I don't want that wiped out of my CV, right? So this is where the humanities comes in, is we recognize there are proxies based on context, and we are laying these layers, and we can infuse it into the algorithm to become more sensitized and more relevant, right? Or the networks of visibility, right? So you want to show which groups you're associated, like this group, right? You want to show you went to this conference. You don't want it to be wiped out. And then I can assess whether you're South African, German, Danish, right? What are the likelihoods? Somebody just announced that. And then the last is cultural capital. We know already zip codes give you information about race, for example, in the US, right? The whole redlining, where I can tell if you came from the Bronx, you're probably African American. For instance, right? There's decades of study on that. So the address says a lot about where you're at. Or hobbies. Do you play golf? Are you a part of a rowing club? That signals a kind of identity. So these are really important characteristics for a model. And here's another for the design company that we are producing as we speak, which is very exciting work. We've developed 3 frameworks, but let me focus on one group, because we've taken many different marginalized groups in many different parts of the world. We are moving in Kenya, in India, Ecuador, and I'm happy to chat more later. But for now, we took a group of disabilities in India, and I'm just going to focus on that. How do you represent disabilities visually? So through a generational framework. And we worked with many disability groups in India, and here's what they said, right? From their sort of insights and their inputs, we came up with a framework of 3 points. They want to be normalized. They don't want to seem like something exotic and out there that needs to be pitied. They want to normalize their everyday, right? I can take care of my day-to-day. They want agency. They want to show they have control. And they want to be humanized. It was very important for them to be laughing in a social setting. And these are visuals which can make a difference. So let me give you some examples. This is normalizing. This is a person who is visually impaired, and she wanted to show the one who's potting and putting the clothes. There's a disabled person there who wants to show that she's doing these groceries, she's at work, she uses a lift, just banal things to show that this is the kind of work that she wants her to be represented in. Agency, right? Where they can use tools because they can do this kind of stuff. They are using their mobiles. Mobiles are permeating their lives, right? Subtitling. Humanizing, where they have children, families, relationships, they're laughing, they have relationships with people, you know? And in terms of curational, right, it's about being personal. That is, it really prioritizes me, my family, it's relatable. I show some kind of affinity and belonging, and performative, right? So let me give you some examples. So here we were asked, which photo do you prefer? The person is on a wheelchair, and she said, well, I prefer this one because I have a relationship, even though we are saying this is representing you at work. So obviously that photo looks like she's doing work, but she chose the other one because it shows she can have that relationship at work, right? Which one is better? This is a hearing impaired person. She said she preferred because it was a 2-way communication. And these nuances matter, right? And which is performative? We asked him, which one do you prefer? She said it's the one where I'm holding the mobile phone, not the other person. So I'm the one who has power, right? So as Jeffrey Bowker says, who's a computer scientist, data should be cooked with care. I agree, right? But who should be the cooks? I believe educationalists are, right? Because we have the recipes to cook the data with care, and with that, we can shift the algorithm in ways that work for us. And so happy to engage with you all more, and if you want to learn more about our projects, come see us at Inclusive AI Lab, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Really good to see a range of what you're doing there. In Richard Attenborough's movie, Gandhi, there's a really good scene where Gandhi is starting to build work in India, and he's doing things, and he's got a white missionary from England who's helping him. And the missionary says, tell me, what else can I do? And Gandhi looks at him and says, I think the best thing you can do is leave us alone. How much is Western interference in the very active use of AI outside Europe and the US, how much is that interfering? How much is it useful? How can we work together better?
It's a really good question. So I come from Bangalore, and I left Bangalore when I was a teenager to the San Francisco. But I remember there were T-shirts in San Francisco saying, don't get Bangalorized. And the outsourcing hub was asked by the government in Bangalore saying, what can we do to help you? And they're like, by not interfering. And so that was also talk about an updated version. But I get this question again and again, particularly with well-meaning technologists who say, maybe I shouldn't interfere. Actually, I disagree, because you have a power, you have platform. It's more about how do you build relationships, right? So if you're a big tech company, I'm working with many of them, what they do is they treat their outsourcing outfits as really back offices, not actual partners in co-creating algorithms, co-creating design. So, which is weird, because then they hire me. So the company that I'm working for right now, they basically hired me to go investigate all these different countries, but they don't want me in touch with their local teams, because they're like, no, they investigate American users by staying up all the way in the night. I'm like, this doesn't make any business sense, right? And I think so we need to reorganize the way in which we relate to our own divisions, our own groups, and recognize that there's strength and power. You may have the finance and platforms, but you do not have the context, the know-how, and that's what will get you together.
Brilliant.
Way forward.
That word context again is so important. Thank you so much.
Thank
you so much,
Thanks.
Payal. And I really think that resonates with